Hello, welcome to Olio, my show. My name is Susan Rushton, and as always, before I begin, I need to explain what Olio means. One definition is that it's short for olla podrida, which is Spanish for rotten bowl, which I just get the biggest kick out of. It's a Spanish-Portuguese dish with essentially everything in the world in it. Pork in all its iterations, bacon, sausage, calves' feet, no, pork feet, what else? Pig's feet, pig's ear, chicken, spinach, cabbage, ox, lamb, chickpeas, essentially everything in the world except kale and lemonade. That's one definition. Another definition is that olio is what comes in between acts of a melodrama. So you might have somebody juggling, you might have somebody singing, you might have somebody doing a skit. None of it has anything to do with anything else, and certainly none of it has anything to do with the melodrama. So in other words, it's apples, oranges, and a monkey wrench. So welcome to my monkey wrench. Today, my guest is a person who rarely, usually people ask me beforehand, what's that monkey wrench for? She's never said a word, and I'm impressed. So this is Jenny Davidson, Executive Director for Stand Up Placer. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining me. And before we go any further, if you have any interest in or curiosity or need for Stand Up Placer, please go online, Stand Up Placer, 2 P's in there, standupplacer.org, or email her, jenny@standupplacer.org, or you can call the crisis line, 800-575-5352. And so please do that if you have any questions or need for Stand Up Placer. And that would mean that people know what Stand Up Placer is. In case people don't know what Stand Up Placer is, Jenny, what's Stand Up Placer?
Stand Up Placer was previously known as Peace for Families, so some people may know it as that name. We've been around for 38 years in Placer County.
Placer County, okay.
And we provide services to survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. And everything from a 55-bed safe house to 25 housing units to 2 service offices where people can come in and get crisis intervention, therapy, life skills classes, legal assistance, really any of the crisis needs that they might have.
Wow. And Stand Up Placer helps people who are survivors of
domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking.
And I'm under the impression that you must have recently added human trafficking to this.
Yeah, in April, Governor Brown named 10 agencies in the state of California as human trafficking service providers, and that's through the California Office of Emergency Services, and we're one of the 10 in the state.
I'm impressed. I'm also depressed.
Yeah.
So who are you, Jenny? Why are you involved with this?
You know, my whole life I've worked with at-risk populations or families who've had some kind of trauma in them. And a lot of times I worked with younger people, I've worked with kids, I've worked in different situations. And what I've really noticed is it comes back to what's happened as far as trauma or in their family of origin, or so much is linked to even adverse childhood experiences, and a lot of that has to do with domestic violence in the home. And so I've worked in that.
So excuse me for interrupting.
Yes.
So if it happens to a child, or a child witnesses this happening to one or both of his parents, or her parents, that child will probably, since we get used to what we're used to, and that's basic,
well,
abuse is basic, then they might copy what they saw?
That can happen. We don't necessarily see that exposure predetermines that that's the life they're going to have as a victim or a perpetrator, but most victims and perpetrators had that as their early childhood experience. And so it's something that we see as a common denominator for the victims and perpetrators for sure. But we also see a lot of kids who can then grow up to be healthy. So there's definitely a correlation, but it's not necessarily predetermining
Okay.
that they have to have this future. So that's why we offer things like therapy for the kids and different programs. We have art classes and stuff to help the kids sort of reprogram their brains and be able to have this healthier life. And so, but also with adverse childhood experiences, we see there's a lot of major medical issues that adults have that can be tied to experiences they had as children. And so
For example?
Heart disease, cancer, diabetes,
Huh.
a lot of things like that. There's a study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences study by the CDC and Kaiser did it together, and they linked
CDC,
the Centers for Disease Control.
Okay.
And they linked these childhood experiences to major illnesses
Wow.
for adults.
Stress then.
Mm-hmm.
Major
stress. Right, exactly.
Wow. Okay. So one of the jobs of stand-up placer is to prevent a child from ontogeny, phylogeny, something or other. What happens to the child happens to the adult. So what your hope is, and what of course my hope is, that can be stopped.
Right, these early interventions can then really change the course of that child's life. Absolutely, that's a big core of what we do, is wanting to be able to see kids be able to grow up and have healthy, productive lives. We see that exposure to violence when they're very young actually changes the way their brains develop. And so it's extremely traumatizing, physically even, and emotionally for sure.
I'm thinking about not only this relatively peaceful country, I'm thinking about Afghanistan or Uzbekistan or Syria. Oh my God.
The incidences of PTSD in children are about the same in a war country as they are for a child who grows up around domestic violence. It's about the same because they're seeing that war at home, where most kids they feel pretty safe at home. That's their sanctuary. That's their downtime, their development, their time when their brains can really explore. And it's not the case for kids growing up with domestic violence, because they have to worry about, if one parent is hurting the other parent and they need help, which of those parents do they go to? Who do they trust? The weaker person who's knocked to the ground, or the stronger person standing over them when they have a problem with homework? So really everything about their lives is kind of wrapped up in the exposure that they're having to domestic violence.
Wow. But at the same time, devil's advocate here, I'm not married to an abuser. I don't know, I'm convinced that I don't know any abusers. I'm convinced that I don't know anybody who's been abused. So how serious is this?
Well, you definitely do know those people.
Okay.
It's 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men are victims of severe violence in the home.
1 in 4 women.
Either domestic violence or sexual assault. And so it's really, really common. That's the severe, but according to the Center for Disease Control, if you look at emotional abuse, financial abuse, psychological abuse, it's 1 in 2. And so if you know a couple people, you know somebody who's been a victim of domestic violence.
Wow.
If you know 20 people, you know 10 people, chances are pretty high that you know people who've been victims of domestic violence.
And I'm not unique.
And you're not unique.
If this is true of me, it's true of everybody, or most people.
Most people know somebody who has been a victim of violence. Every time I've ever given a public speech to 40, 50 people, I'll have 5, 10 people come up to me and say it happened to them. And they'll say people didn't believe them. They'll say they tried to get help and no one listened. So one of the most important things we can do is listen and believe, and give them our crisis line number, have them reach out for help. And studies show that if the first person they tell believes them about their story of what happened, they're 88% more likely to seek further services to get help and to get safe. That's such a really high correlation. So it's just really important for us to get out everywhere, tell people, call our crisis line and get help.
Okay. And again, the crisis line is, since I can imagine that 3/4, at least half of the people who are seeing this will need
Yeah.
this sort of thing. Crisis line, 800-575-5352, or check out standupplacer.org. You said that there are several safe houses.
We have one safe house
one
in an
safe house.
undisclosed location. That's actually a place that has pretty high security, and it's a safe place. If somebody is in danger and they can't be at home, this is a safe place for them. And
Is it like a dorm with a variety of bedrooms?
it has 13 bedrooms, 5 kitchens.
Wow.
It's a little bit like a hotel that has a large common space also. And then we also have transitional housing units and rapid rehousing units. So we have about 25. Those are just scattered throughout the county. It could be your next door neighbor. And the survivors find their own place, and then they pay 30% of their income toward the rent, and we pay the rest of their rent. We go in every week and do case management with them. We help them with financial coaching. They have access to therapy, life skills classes, support groups, and financial coaching. I don't know if I already said that, but really a wide range of things that we try to do to help them live a life of self-determination.
Wow. And so I can imagine that it can be just an amazing awareness that there is something that one, at the same time, they are probably having their their television monitored, television viewing. So the solution then is to let people who are friends of those people know that there is a place to go. There are people who care, that there's a crisis line to call.
Right.
Yeah. So
And a lot of people will stay in that violent situation longer. Any one of those, domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, they stay longer because they think they don't have a safe place to go. They think that maybe they could go to a safe house for 30 days, but then what? And our safe house is 90 days, and then our housing program is 12 to 24 months. So we really make sure that they have everything they're going to need. If they leave with just the clothes on their backs, we're going to get them clothing, we're going to get them food, we're going to make sure they have a couch when they get their own place. You know, they'll have beds, they'll have towels and spatulas and, you know, whatever. And that comes from
toilet paper.
Toilet paper,
Yeah.
right. That all of that stuff comes from donors who really care about them, who've heard their stories, who know what we do, and they say, hey, you know, I have this extra couch. I just bought new furniture. I need somewhere to donate my couch. I need to donate my old clothing, whatever. That it's things like that, people looking for a place to donate those things. We actually send it all through our thrift store, and all of our survivors can shop for free. So we don't ever just walk up to a survivor and say, here are the 4 shirts you get to wear for the next 90 days. They actually go to the thrift store, they shop for free, they pick out anything they want, their style, their color, the thing that's going to make them feel better about themselves when they're standing up in court, or the different things that they're, you know, a job interview, whatever. They get to go and pick out their own furnishings for their home, whatever they want. And then if something's selling in our thrift store, all that money just goes back to the program anyway. And so if anybody wants to do that, or they want to visit the thrift store and go shopping, that's in Roseville.
Where in Roseville?
141 Riverside.
Okay, 140. What's the name of it?
It is the Stand-Up Placer Thrift Boutique.
Okay. Okay, I'll have to check that out.
Yes.
I love thrift stores.
Oh, great.
141 Riverside in Roseville.
Yes.
Okay, okay. So what happens when, if I needed to call this 800 number, what would happen?
The first thing we would do is talk about a safety plan. We'd want to find out, are you safe right now? Is it safe that you're making this phone call? Is there a way to be safer over the next 5 minutes, or the next hour, the next 24 hours? So we talk about immediately, how are you safe? And then if the person wants to leave that environment that they're in, we talk about what's a safe way to leave. They might not need to leave that environment. Maybe their ex just moved out and they're safe right now, but they need resources. They need a support group. They need education. All of those things we can do through our service offices, and even, you know, help with other kinds of resources, food, clothing, whatever. That can happen through our service offices too. So they don't have to go into our safe house to get all of those kinds of things. If they do need our safe house, then we talk to them. We'll pre-screen them. We'll tell them a safe place where we can meet them, and we just bring them and their children in. We take whoever the survivor of the violence is, whether it's male or female, and their children are welcome in our safe house.
Okay. And your safe house is really anonymous. Nobody, you don't, okay. It's not indicated anywhere on your website.
Right.
Okay. I won't even ask what town it's in.
It's in Placer County.
Okay.
I'll give you that much.
Okay.
But just you, because we're friends now.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. How would I tell if I were madly in love with somebody that this person is more likely than another person
Right.
to abuse
It's
me?
really hard because they groom people. So an abusive person
What do you mean they groom people?
They will do what they can to get somebody to trust them. They will love you more passionately than you've ever been loved. They will do things for you, and this is true for all of the perpetrators, whether it's domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking. Chances are people are so afraid of this sexual assault perpetrator that's hiding in the bushes in the alley. That's probably not who you need to be afraid of.
Who's going to come out and beat you over the head immediately.
It happens. It happens. It happens. But more likely, you know the person. It's somebody that you trust. It's somebody that you let your guard down in front of. It's somebody who has shown you a lot of attention. And that's the same with domestic violence, with human trafficking too. They trick this person into believing that they really care about them. And then it starts to have this tension building phase. And during that time, things seem a little off and you're afraid, like anything's going to make them upset and you don't know really what's happening and why.
Honey, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Walking on eggshells is what you hear it referred to. And then there's the explosive phase. And at that point, that's when there's something abusive. And we will help people way before it needs to be physical. So please do not wait until somebody has thrown a punch or kicked you or anything like that. We help them at those beginning red flags. And so after the explosive incident, when that person thinks, oh, I need to leave, this isn't safe, I need to go, then it goes back around to this honeymoon phase of the, I love you so much, and
Please don't leave me.
I wouldn't
I'll
do
kill
that
myself.
exactly. There's the threats, or there's, I wouldn't do it if I wasn't drinking. Well, you know what?
Well, honey.
If every time I drank grape soda, I hit somebody, I would give up grape soda, right? I would choose orange. And so that's the thing, is that it just goes into this cycle that repeats itself. And eventually that honeymoon phase can go away because just the explosive incident and the tension are enough to keep that person in that relationship. So if anybody kind of wonders if this is what's going on, or they have a friend or a relative and they wonder, they can call our crisis line and we can talk them through, are these red flags that you should be concerned about? And even in teen dating violence relationships, we see teen dating violence worse and worse every year.
Wow.
And so, and younger, and especially now that there's so much, cell phones and all of that kind of stuff, social media, so much more of that is happening really, really young. And so just give us a call and we'll talk you through it.
I knew a woman who was married to somebody she hated, who didn't treat her right, and she didn't treat him right, but her first boyfriend was a man who opened up doors for her and held chairs for her, and she didn't think that was manly. That's not how a real man behaves, because that's how she grew up.
I was going to say, it probably has something to do with what she saw as a child. And we see that people who, that more often than not, about 15% of our victims are male, so 85% are female, but we do serve a lot of male victims. But we, more often than not, if children are exposed to domestic violence, if they're going to be in a domestic violence relationship when they're older, females will end up as a victim and males will end up as a perpetrator. And a lot of it has to do with what they saw. And if you think about it, if you grew up in a house where there were big dogs that were like barking, kind of aggressive dogs, and you always were around it your whole life, then if you're walking down the street, you see a big aggressive dog, you're not that scared of it. You've seen that dog before, right? And that's what we see in the dating relationships. They grew up around anger and abuse and screaming. They might not see it as a red flag when they see it in a relationship. That's just what things are like.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
And for the perpetrator side too, whether it's the male perpetrator, female perpetrator, we see that this is how the person in their family got their point across. This is how they made sure that the other people heard them. And so they keep drawing on that tool set that they had as children.
Because we get used to what we're used to.
Right.
This is basic and ordinary.
And it's hard to relearn. It's as hard to relearn as when you fall, you put your hands out to catch you, right?
Yeah.
There's these gut reactions. It's hard to relearn and to stop having abusive traits. And what they have to do is really, really want it, really get therapy, really try to change. And I believe it's possible, but it starts with that really, really want it.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen.
Right. Okay. You have this 800 number, which is 800-575-5352. And how often do you get, does the phone ring?
Rings day and night. It's staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We get about 4,000 calls a year, and it rings all the time. It rings for people who want information for a family or friend. It rings for people who need help right this second. It rings for people who had something happen a few years ago, and they're at this point in life where they want to deal with it. They want to have somebody to talk to. So there's a wide variety of who's calling that phone number, but it's ringing day and night. Law enforcement calls it, and they'll have us respond with them on scene during a human trafficking bust. Or
Excuse me, you said law enforcement calls it?
Mm-hmm.
So the cops call that number.
Right.
And why?
And we will dispatch an advocate to wherever they are on scene with a victim.
Okay.
Or to the hospital, or to a CPS call. And we will have an advocate there with the family, with the victim and the children, and to be at their side and help them through it. We respond to the hospitals after sexual assault has taken place, and we sit with the victim for the whole evidentiary exam, which can be sometimes 6-7 hours
Oh,
that
Lord.
they're in the hospital having an exam.
Pardon me? Goodness.
Yeah, it's horrendous, the trauma that happens after one of these incidents.
First is the attack, and then there's this examination that lasts. That can last for 7 hours?
It can. It doesn't always. Some are shorter, and it really depends on the extent of the violence that happened at the time. And it's, we'll try to play music. We'll try to make it soothing. We bring a bag of clothing, of brand new clothes, because their clothing is going to be taken as evidence. And we'll bring a stuffed animal. We have some people in the community who make homemade quilts, and we'll bring them a homemade quilt to wrap up in, so they're not just in the paper drape and the paper gown and everything's so sterile in a hospital. We make sure that they're as comfortable as they can be, and and we're really supportive, and we understand the dynamics of what they've gone through, and we're there to support them.
Wow.
They don't have to go through it alone. That's the thing. No matter which of these victim types you're talking about, whatever's happened in their life, they don't have to go through the aftermath alone.
No. Yeah. Okay. You say there are these volunteers.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, there are volunteers.
Yes. We could not live without our volunteers. Our volunteers are usually the ones responding to the hospitals. Our volunteers are the ones who are helping with childcare, so that the parent can get a life skills class or get therapy. They're helping go alongside somebody to court when they have a court appointment.
What training does one need as a volunteer?
It depends on the kind of volunteering they're wanting to do. In the state of California, anybody who's volunteering at a domestic violence rape crisis center has a mandatory 65-hour training, at least. And so they have that.
Good.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
Yeah, it is really good. It's hard to get volunteers sometimes, though, because that's a big commitment. But once they're trained, they can volunteer at any agency in the state of California, or be employed by one, and so that's really, really great. But people who might want to volunteer on the other side, maybe they want to do clerical work or help with an event or something, they can do that without any of that major training. They just come in for that day and learn what they're going to be doing that day. And we do have a big event coming up.
Okay.
If anybody wants to volunteer
When?
or a sponsor or come out, we have a run 1 month from today, October 1st. It's 5K, 10K walk or run, and it's at Sculpture Park. And they can sign up.
Say that again.
Sculpture Park
Sculpture Park.
in Roseville,
Okay.
where the big pink sculpture
Oh, yeah.
is
Okay.
there by the freeway. And they can sign up on our website,
Okay.
and it's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun during that event.
The October what?
October 1 first.
Okay. That's October 1 in 2016, in case you're seeing this in another year. but the 800 number has stayed the same
Oh, yes,
for
it's
years.
been years.
Okay, but and how often have you had this fundraiser? This is a fundraiser?
Yeah, I think this is our 4th or 5th year.
Oh, cool.
It's got to be our 5th year, actually, yes. Yeah,
All
so
right.
it's really great. People have a lot of fun.
Great, that's wonderful. And to volunteer, people should volunteer for Stand Up Placer. People should investigate at standupplacer.org.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Go to our website.
Yes, okay. So again, that's standupplacer.org. The crisis line is 800-575-5352. If you're in trouble, and it's not likely if you're watching this, because you probably won't be allowed to watch it, but if you know somebody or you recognize, how would you recognize this? How would a person recognize this?
A lot of times you know that there's this friend of yours, this family member of yours, and you can tell that they're being controlled. You can tell that they don't have the power of their own decisions of their life. I think they at least know that this isn't a healthy situation, and then they can call and ask for more information.
Okay, yeah. And so this is both men and women and children, mostly women and children. And tell me the statistics again. This is
1 in 4 women will be a victim of severe domestic violence. 1 in 7 men. And then the emotional, financial, psychological abuse is 1 in 2. So it's happening a lot.
Yeah, yes. And how often do you get calls about
Human trafficking?
Human trafficking, yes.
You know, last year we had 10 people who we served that were human trafficking survivors, and they were served under our domestic violence or sexual assault services, because with human trafficking, that is part of it. And now this year that we have been designated as a human trafficking center, we have already served over 50 by June. I don't have the number as of today, but by June it was already 5 times higher. So it's happening a lot. It's happening in our community. It's anytime sex is exchanged for money and there's an element of force, fraud, or coercion, or if the victim, the person that's being used for sex, is under the age of 18, because at that point they are too young to consent to sex. So anytime one of those things is a factor, it's human trafficking. And we are the agency in our county to help.
Most people would call that prostitution.
They might, but it isn't.
It isn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if a person's under 18, they don't have the ability to consent, and so it's automatically human trafficking. Prostitution would imply that somebody had a choice, and this is a choice they're making for themselves, and they're criminal under the law. Very rarely does anyone have a choice.
Okay.
Very rarely. They're usually forced into something that they aren't really wanting for their life. Or they were trafficked as teenagers, and maybe they've had a few birthdays since then, but really their life choices aren't really their own to make at this point. They have been abused for so many years, and they're sort of trapped in this situation.
Yeah. I'm imagining that your hope is that Stand Up Placer will soon not be needed.
We would,
eventually.
yeah,
Wouldn't that be wonderful? That would be a paradise.
We would love to work ourselves out of a job. We would love, our vision is ending domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking in Placer County. Every one of us would love to have no reason to come to work today, because there just aren't any victims of these crimes. It's not something that we're seeing. Last year we served 2,500 survivors with 25,000 services. And so it's definitely,
God, this is bigger than I thought it was going to be. Wow, wow. I'm really happy that I asked you. I'm really, really happy.
So am I, thank you.
Jenny Davidson, Executive Director of Stand Up Placer, thank you very much for joining me, for telling me this hopeful and useful information. If you're interested in learning more, please log on to standupplacer.org. If you have any questions or need help, call the crisis line 800-575-5352, or at least go on to the website. Thank you very much for watching. Jenny, thank you very much
Thank you.
for joining me, and I'll see you again.